So today is March 12th, 2020, and the coronavirus is really impacting Seattle, especially all over the world. And what a time. And I want to let people know that I am working through this time, and all my colleagues in my office, we're all on board. We're sanitizing after every client, and in my case, I'm offering to people that I work with gloves and also with a mask. And some people take me up on it, some people don't. And I do really fully encourage people who are feeling immune compromised to lay low. And if you have made an appointment and you're feeling vulnerable or you're expressing symptoms, please do cancel and reschedule. We'll work that out, no problem. And but in the meantime, if you're healthy, if you have not had contact with someone who's traveled recently, and if you haven't had contact with someone who has had symptoms, especially if they've tested positive, do feel free to come in to see me. I have not had contact with anyone who has been known to be tested positive. And I don't have any particular I don't have any particular concerns about my office being. Yeah, I would just say that I don't have any concerns about my office. We're all feeling pretty good about it. So I want to let people know that if we're in process with working on your neck or your headaches or your back, you can continue therapy pretty safely. I would feel like, unless we find out something else about the virus that we didn't know about. But until then, feel free to keep coming in. I have a son who's almost 12, and I've been getting updates from the Seattle public school system, just about every day. They are closed now, not because of a case in his school, but because of a case of a staff member in another school in another part of the city. And so they have decided to close the schools, especially to protect many of their staff members who are over 50, and some of them may have health concerns. So it was really a choice to protect kind of the whole community in that way. The kids, as you may know, are less at risk in terms of catching something, and it hasn't been shown yet that they are transmitters. But as we know, schools breed germs and things like that. But I have been really impressed with his school, Jane Addams, in the Meadowbrook area, and the lengths that they've gone to. They've been keeping doors open so that no one is having to open and close doorknobs. They have washing stations. They give kids time to wash their hands and to sanitize their hands often. So I've been really impressed with that, and also to kind of keep the response at a reasonable level. If someone does, sneeze, if someone sneezes, they have been learning to help the kids not freak out if someone sneezes, because there are other seasonal allergies, and we're at the tail end of flu season and all that. And my son and I have been talking about the coronavirus. He asked me, how bad is the coronavirus? And as you know, I don't have medical training, but I do liken any kind of life form. Any life form has a place in this world, that it's playing a part. And I told him that my time in the Methow Valley, spending time with organic farmers and people doing biodynamic agriculture and permaculture, the idea is that the obstacles that come our way, the pests or the weeds, they have their seasons, they have their purpose, and you find ways of working with it. And people who grow, yearly, they can tell you that every year there's a different kind of weed that proliferates, you know. And so, you know, one year it might be the vetch, one year it might be the purslane, one year it might be the mullein. But they kind of rotate, they kind of change around, you know, each kind of has its season. There used to be this weed called Barnaby that was introduced into the Medhow Valley in the 1950s. And it was introduced for the purpose of creating a lot of buzz for the Medhow Valley being a destination for hunting season, because they believed that the deer would proliferate if you introduced a fast-growing invasive weed called Barnaby. I'm only laughing because of how much of it I've picked in my lifetime before it got dealt with. But it was all over the valley, parts of the valley. Oh, it was really eating up pasture land. It was really eating up the shrub steppe, the pristine, beautiful sagebrush shrub steppe of the Medhow Valley. If you haven't been there for wildflower season, I do recommend it. It does turn into Oz around April and May if you haven't seen it. It's pretty wonderful, and it would be lovely to go on a walk with a botanist around that time and showing you all the wildflowers. But some of them, were having to compete with this Barnaby that was this bushy, woody. Oh, it was so noxious. Like, it had like these thistly kind of seed heads, and many of us were allergic to it. I mean, you would just put your hand on it, on the stem, if you made the mistake of trying to pull it without gloves on. Your hands would be, irritated. You'd start sneezing, and your eyes would be watering, and it's a bummer. So, all the homesteads that I had the pleasure of working with because of relationships with friends and growers who always loved having an extra hand. Great way to learn. So for all the acres of Barnaby that I've hung out in, interesting, just the idea that, getting back to, in the context of something like a coronavirus, there's not a lot of relationship to something that was man-made and introduced. And then, of course, the deer did not eat the Barnaby, and it took so much dedicated work to finally eradicate Barnaby in the valley. But the idea, watching the valley go through that did teach me that despite all of the problems, there is a greater natural system that does take care of itself, I guess is the idea that I was coming back to. Yes, there's lots of nature that we need to be wary of, that we need to be careful of, and good to keep learning about, especially regarding our own immunity and our own, our limitations with some proximity to certain life forms. So good to add to that base of understanding, but also still keeping it in the bounds of respect for a greater life system that encompasses all of that, that is self-healing and self-regenerating, even if it should create something like a coronavirus. So when he asked me, like, is the coronavirus itself like a bad thing, I just hesitate to call anything within this greater life system in itself bad, because it's balancing something. Everything is here, has a purpose in balancing something. That is what life has chosen to bring its next idea of balance. Doesn't mean we always know what that is, but I do believe that the more we can attune to the wisdom of natural systems, I think that there's a lot to trust and to lean into and be supported by. Thanks for going on that journey with me.